All right, now here's another quick question. Well, actually, first, you guys see I got a nice haircut. My hair is a lot shorter than those last few learning videos. But so today I want to actually speak about angels and demons. Now everybody knows every demon is technically an angel, right? But in the modern day church, the spiritual aspect of reality is not spoken about as much as I think it could be spoken about. So for you all who maybe haven't spent any time trying to learn or read up in the Word about angels or demons, the spiritual aspect, this verse is probably the best verse for you all, and then you can click out of the learning video and then sign off on Instagram and toss your phone off of a clip. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But so the first scripture, Hebrews 13:2, and it says, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." All right, so that is the book of Hebrews. One of those reminders that angels are real. You believe in the Bible, you believe in angels, and for lack of better terms, they're walking on the earth, right? Sometimes you're speaking to a person, and lo and behold, it's an angel. All right. So yeah, start there. If we're kind, if we're aware, and we try and serve our Father, when you interact with anyone, just know you could be interacting with an angel. Now here's a little bit more for the deep divers, right? So Revelation 1:20 says this: "The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, and of the 7 golden lampstands is this: the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." So why is this important? If you guys see, the 7 stars here represents angels. Right, so sometimes in scripture you'll see stars, and stars are meant to represent angelic beings, as the scripture here says in Revelation. Now that's going to be important for some of the other stuff that I'm going to try and bring up. Matthew 16:22 verse 22 and 23. "So Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. 'Never, Lord,' he said, 'this shall never happen to you.'" Jesus just basically told his disciples that he was going to give up his life. Verse 23 then says, "Jesus turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns.'" So now here's probably the greatest warning. Well, no, maybe the greatest warning to humans. Sometimes in life, we could be led by Satan if we're not on guard, if we're not trying to serve our Father. So Peter, one whom Jesus has said has a throne in heaven in the eternal kingdom, one of his closest disciples, was actually called Satan at a point in time by Jesus. This means, of course, Peter was Peter. Jesus turns to Peter, but he calls him Satan because his thought process was being led by Satan. So Jesus spoke to Satan in Peter, because Peter was going to try and stop the will of God, namely the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross for all of our benefit. But now going back to some of the star language, this will be super important for angels. Kind of a side question. I've always asked myself this video, but the book of Daniel mentions this about stars, about angels. Because I've asked this question to myself. I said, well, could angels be saved? Right? Or at least, if Judgment Day hasn't happened, no one knows the day or hour, what could happen right now that could keep an angel from falling? From when Judgment Day occurs, for that angel to be still holy, to still be a part of God, maybe refined, maybe have gone through some fire or brought out of the water, so to speak. But basically, what could we do to help angels, right? So really quickly, if you guys want to go to Daniel 8, if you want to try and read along, but Daniel 8 verses 8 and 9. "Then the male goat made himself exceedingly great, But once he became powerful, the large horn was broken, and in its place, 4 prominent horns came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. Verse 9 says, and out of one of them came a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Verse 10, it grew up to the heavenly lights. Verse 10 as well, it grew up to the heavenly lights, and some of the lights, that is, some of the stars, it threw down and trampled them. Right, so hold on, what is this? What is Daniel talking about? Stars being trampled down, right? Really quickly, then jump to same chapter, and also context is very important. Context is king when it comes to reading the Bible. So if you guys have time, if you care, go and read the entire chapter, and then go and read the entire book of Daniel, and then read more of the scripture to gain clarity on this. So verse 16 of Daniel chapter 8, it says, and I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Ulai, and he called out and said, Gabriel is a very special angel, good angel, explain the vision to this man. Verse 17, so he came near to where I was standing, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. And he said to me, Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. The time of the end. So all of what Daniel was saying about stars, who we've seen in Revelation, could represent angels, right? In the time of the end, there will be some little power that rises up, reaches the beautiful land, so on and so forth, and tramples stars. What does that mean? Why is that important? That means there could be angels good today and bad tomorrow, right? Satan, we know, swept a third of the angels a long time ago. But what about tomorrow, right? Last thing, because I don't want to draw this video out too much. Now someone will say, well, what is the, what do we do with this now, right? Why does all this matter? Angels seem to be real per the Bible, and I think reality is pretty evident. Angels can still fall, even in a time of the end, at least per what Gabriel told Daniel the prophet. Here's my conclusion. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6:3 that he will judge angels. And he says he's speaking either about the church or maybe some sort of apostle-like beings like himself. He had a specific mission. But nonetheless, he says that at least he will judge angels, right? So here's the thing. The prodigal son parable. And I'm not going to read through the entire parable. Feel free to go and read Jesus' words about this parable. But long story short, all of creation, the angels, the humans, were basically children of God, right? The prodigal son parable speaks of 2 sons. One son leaves the home. He takes his inheritance. He goes and wastes everything. Long story short, he ends up feeding the pigs. He says, man, I sinned. What am I doing here? He comes to himself and realizes, right? A light bulb kind of goes off in his mind. Then he says, man, I'm going to go back home. He said, the servants of my father's kingdom are eating better than me, right? He gets up, he repents basically. He sees his father, and his father, seeing him a far way off, runs to him, gives him a big old hug. He kisses him. He gives him a ring on his finger. He gives him new shoes. And the scripture says that he gives them the best robe, right? This son that returns is rewarded, not for leaving, that'll be sin, right? And we've all sinned. But he's rewarded because he returns home. He missed and loved his father. That's not the rest of the parable, right? The second part makes me believe is relevant even to angels. The reason why. In that parable, there's the other son who never left the home, right? This other son, when he sees his brother return, he gets mad at the father. He says, man, this son of yours, he's returned. You've never done these things for me. He says, I've always kept your commands, right? The son refuses to enter in the big feast. The father says, hey, man, you've always had everything, right? But this son of mine who was lost is now found. He was dead and he's alive. that son who gets upset made me wonder, like, wait a minute, who could that be? Right? Because if this parable is just about humanity, which it does have human application, but I believe it's further than that. Right? Because what human could ever complain about always keeping the Father's commands and be upset at the return of a sinner? Only Jesus could even fit that role of being someone who could, a human who could always, who always kept the commands, right, of the Father. I believe Jesus was given a glimpse of the salvation that could be not only for the humans, but for angels who otherwise would be swept all the way till judgment and their fall completed when Paul and whomever God is chosen for judgment. But what if they could fight on the good side, right? They could return home, and in this moment, right, they can love their Father and be forgiven. Hey, let me know what you guys think, all right? There's a bit more scripture that I think is worthy of being added into this point, but for the sake of an 11-minute video for a person who's not a YouTuber or anything like that, that's all for now, all right? Feel free to reach out if you guys are interested in learning more about my perspective on this. If not, take care.